March 18, 2026 marks day 46 in the search for Nancy Guthrie, and this morning brought what appeared to be a major development in the investigation. According to two sources briefed on the matter who spoke with NBC News, the FBI has successfully recovered additional surveillance footage from cameras positioned throughout Nancy's Tucson property. For weeks, investigators had been working to extract data from multiple security cameras that covered different angles of the home. Today, they finally succeeded. The cameras in question were mounted in strategic locations around the property. One camera was fastened to a fence, focused on the back of the house. Another camera captured the driveway and the front of the garage door. These weren't the doorbell camera that had already captured the now infamous footage of the masked suspect. These were additional surveillance systems, and investigators had hoped they might provide new angles, new evidence, or most importantly, a clearer view of what happened the night Nancy disappeared. But here's the problem. The footage shows nothing suspicious. The recovered images captured exactly what you'd expect to see on a residential property over the course of several weeks. Family members coming and going, landscapers tending to the yard, pool maintenance workers doing their jobs, all of this activity stretching back weeks prior to the kidnapping. Normal everyday life in an affluent Tucson neighborhood. Nothing out of place, nothing alarming. And most critically, no sign whatsoever of the person who would eventually abduct Nancy Guthrie from her home. The masked individual who appeared on Nancy's doorbell camera the night she vanished, wearing a ski mask, backpack, and gun holster, does not appear in any of the newly recovered footage. Not even once. The previously released doorbell footage remains the only known image that authorities have of the suspect. Think about what that means for a moment. This person approached Nancy's home, disabled her doorbell camera, and abducted her without appearing on any other surveillance system on the property. That level of awareness suggests something investigators have suspected from the beginning, but are now forced to confront more directly. This wasn't random. This was planned, meticulously planned. The FBI released the original doorbell camera footage on February 10th, 9 days after Nancy disappeared. The video showed a figure authorities described as male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with an average build. He was wearing dark clothing, gloves, and carrying a distinctive 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker Pack backpack. The footage captured him approaching the front door, and investigators believe he tampered with the camera shortly after. What the video didn't show was how he got there, where he went afterward, or whether he had surveilled the property before that night. Now, with all available camera footage from the property recovered and analyzed, investigators know something else. They know this suspect understood the camera placement. He knew where to walk, where not to walk, which angles were covered and which weren't. That kind of knowledge doesn't come from luck. It comes from observation, from planning, from someone who had studied this property before. According to neighbors who spoke with News Nation's Brian Enton, FBI agents have been back in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood over the past 24 to 48 hours, going door to door once again, but this time they're asking different questions, more specific questions. Questions that suggest the investigation has entered what one former FBI agent described as the third or fourth level of investigative depth. Enton reported that agents have been asking about a particular neighbor who moved out of the Catalina foothills area before Nancy disappeared. They want to know who this person was, where they moved to, and why they left. But even more interesting, investigators have shown particular interest in several houses currently under construction in the neighborhood. They're asking for the names of all contractors and workers who have been on those job sites, not just the general contractors, all of them. Subcontractors, electricians, plumbers, landscapers, anyone who had reason to be in that neighborhood in the weeks and months before February 1st. Former FBI agent Steve Moore, speaking with Brian Enton, explained what this means in practical terms. When you lose your car keys, he said, you start by looking in the obvious places. Your pocket, the counter, the table where you usually put them. When they're not there, you retrace your steps. You think about what you were wearing, where you went that day. That's the second level. By the third or fourth level, you're pulling cushions off the couch. You're checking places you wouldn't normally check. You're going deeper and deeper because the obvious answers haven't worked. That's where this investigation is right now. The FBI and Pima County Sheriff's Department have exhausted the obvious leads. DNA found on gloves near the property was traced to a local restaurant worker with no connection to the case. Ransom notes sent to media outlets led nowhere. 2 men were briefly detained on separate matters, both released without charges. The family has been cleared. All of them passed polygraph tests. Savannah Guthrie, her sister Annie, brother-in-law Tommaso Cioni, and brother Cameron Guthrie have all cooperated fully with investigators, and Sheriff Chris Nanos stated clearly that the family are victims, plain and simple, and that suggesting otherwise is not only wrong but cruel. So investigators are going back. They're asking about dates that seemed irrelevant before. Neighbors have reported that FBI agents specifically requested surveillance footage from January 24th. That's 8 days before Nancy disappeared. It's also a Friday, just like January 11th, another date investigators have expressed interest in, and just like January 31st, the night Nancy was taken. 3 Fridays. That's not a coincidence, that's a pattern. It suggests someone was in that neighborhood on weekends, possibly casing the area, learning routines, studying security systems. The question of construction workers is particularly significant. Construction sites provide a legitimate reason to be in a neighborhood. A person in work clothes carrying tools or equipment doesn't raise suspicion. They blend in. And if houses in Nancy's neighborhood were under construction in January, workers would have been coming and going for weeks or even months. Some of those workers might have noticed things, seen unusual activity, or, more troubling, one of those workers might have been involved. It's a theory that makes sense when you consider the sophistication of the crime. Whoever abducted Nancy knew how to disable a doorbell camera. They knew the layout of the property well enough to avoid other surveillance. They knew Nancy lived alone. They knew she was 84 years old and likely couldn't physically resist. They knew, according to Sheriff Nanos, why they targeted her specifically. All of that knowledge had to come from somewhere. Sheriff Nanos made a statement last week that sent a chill through the Tucson community. When asked by NBC News whether the suspect could strike again, Nanos didn't hesitate. "Absolutely," he said. "We believe we know why he did this, and we believe that it was targeted. But we can't. We're not 100% sure of that. So it would be silly to tell people, yeah, don't worry about it. You're not his target," he continued with a stark warning. "Don't think for a minute that because it happened to the Guthrie family, you're safe. No, keep your wits about you." That statement raised immediate questions. If investigators believe they know why Nancy was targeted, why not share that information with the public? The answer likely comes down to investigative integrity. If the motive is related to something specific about Nancy or her family, revealing that detail might compromise leads investigators are still pursuing. But the fact that Nanos couldn't say with absolute certainty that this was targeted suggests there's still ambiguity in the evidence, still questions they can't answer. The Pima County Sheriff's Department released a statement on Friday, March 14th, saying they continue to analyze various forms of evidence in the case, including material from laboratories, as well as images and videos captured by cameras, but they declined to comment on the details or current status of that analysis. That kind of silence is normal in an active investigation, but after 46 days with no arrests, the public's patience is wearing thin. And now, the investigation faces a new complication. The sheriff leading this case is himself under scrutiny. On March 12th, Daniel Gutierrez, a Republican congressional candidate from Arizona, officially launched a recall effort targeting Sheriff Chris Nanos. Gutierrez told the New York Post that he has hundreds of volunteers working to collect signatures to remove Nanos from his position. "This is a bipartisan effort," Gutierrez said. "It's not like we're trying to get signatures from one party or the other." He has been an embarrassment to Tucson and to Pima County with this Nancy Guthrie case. But the Nancy Guthrie case isn't the only issue Gutierrez cited. According to reports from the Arizona Republic, which came to light earlier this month, Nanos allegedly misstated his law enforcement employment history on his public resume. Those alleged misrepresentations were made in sworn testimony during a deposition. That revelation, Gutierrez said, was the final straw. Now, the Pima County Board of Supervisors has announced they will scrutinize Nanos' employment history during their next meeting on Tuesday, March 25th. District 2 Supervisor Matt Heinz didn't mince words in his statement to Newsweek. "I lost confidence in his ability to lead the department back in 2024 when he corrupted a free and fair election using the authority, resources, and personnel of his office to threaten, intimidate, and silence his general election opponent," Heinz wrote. "Most importantly, he has betrayed the trust that our community placed in him. Without that trust, he cannot effectively lead the department." Heinz specifically referenced what he called work history misrepresentation and apparent false testimony that Nanos had previously provided. The 5-member board intends to discuss these allegations publicly next week. For his part, Nanos responded to the recall effort with measured words. "We're aware of the recall, and it's the right of the people. he told Tucson's KOLD News. We'll always honor the will of the people, and that's what makes democracy. Under Arizona law, Gutierrez has 120 days from March 12th to collect the necessary signatures to trigger a recall election. The timing couldn't be worse for the investigation. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 46 days. Her family is desperate for answers. The public is demanding progress. And now, the credibility of the department leading the search is being called into question. Whether these political challenges will impact the day-to-day investigative work is unclear, but it certainly doesn't help public confidence in a case that has already tested the patience of a community. The recall effort has also sparked debate within law enforcement circles about whether criticism of Nanos is fair. Some argue that the Nancy Guthrie case is extraordinarily difficult. Abductions of women in their 80s are exceptionally rare. This particular case involves a sophisticated perpetrator who clearly planned ahead, an elderly victim who may have limited ability to survive without her medications, and a crime scene that, while yielding some evidence, hasn't provided the breakthrough investigators need. Other sheriffs, they argue, might not have done better, but critics counter that Nanos's public statements have sometimes created confusion. His assertion that investigators believe they know why Nancy was targeted but aren't certain raised more questions than it answered. His warning that the suspect could absolutely strike again alarmed the community without providing actionable guidance. And the decision to scale back certain aspects of the search, including the suspension of cadaver dog operations, has been questioned by retired K-9 officers who say it defies logic to stop using that resource while the case remains unsolved. Last week, the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed to Fox News Digital that cadaver dogs are no longer being actively deployed in the search for Nancy Guthrie. They are available if needed in the future, Nanos said, but offered no explanation for why they were stood down. Retired K-9 officers interviewed by various media outlets expressed confusion at that decision. Cadaver dogs, they pointed out, are specifically trained to detect human remains even in challenging terrain like the desert surrounding Tucson. If there's any possibility Nancy's body could be in the area, those dogs should still be working. The decision to pull back cadaver dogs, combined with reports that the FBI has scaled down the number of agents physically stationed in Tucson and is now working much of the case from Phoenix, has fueled speculation that investigators believe Nancy was taken out of the immediate area. If that's true, it would explain why local search efforts have been reduced. But it also raises a grim question. Do investigators believe Nancy is still alive? Sheriff Nanos has been careful not to say definitively one way or the other. In early March, he told NBC News that he believes investigators are definitely closer to identifying a suspect. But closer is relative. Closer than day one doesn't mean close to an arrest. And 46 days without proof of life is an ominous timeline in any abduction case. Savannah Guthrie acknowledged this painful reality in a public statement last month. While still holding out hope, she and her family have had to confront the possibility that this is no longer a rescue operation. Experts who spoke with CBS News noted that after 6 weeks without contact, without ransom negotiations, without any confirmed sighting, the likelihood of a positive outcome diminishes significantly. That doesn't mean investigators have given up. It means they're being realistic about what they might find. The family has done everything they can. They've offered a reward that now totals $1.2 million. $1 million from the family, plus up to $100,000 from the FBI, plus additional contributions from community members and advocacy groups. That's an extraordinary sum, and yet no one has come forward with information substantial enough to lead to an arrest. Former FBI agent Steve Moore, in a separate interview with NewsNation, speculated on why that might be. One possibility, he said, is that the person or people responsible for this are not from the area. They came in, they did this, and they left. That would explain why no one locally recognizes the suspect. It would explain why tips have been limited despite the massive reward. But Moore also raised a more disturbing possibility. The other scenario, he said, is that someone does know who did this, but they're too afraid to come forward. If this was done by someone with a history of violence or someone connected to organized crime, or even just someone who has made credible threats, witnesses might be terrified to speak up, even for $1 million. That theory aligns with another aspect of the case that has puzzled investigators, the ransom notes. Multiple media outlets, including TMZ and others, received ransom demands in the days and weeks after Nancy disappeared. These demands specified cryptocurrency payments and included graphic descriptions of consequences if the ransom wasn't paid. But here's what's strange. The deadlines passed. No payment was made, at least not publicly, and nothing happened. No additional contact. No follow-through on the threats. That's highly unusual in kidnapping cases. Typically, when a ransom demand is made, the kidnappers maintain contact. They provide proof of life. They negotiate. The fact that the ransom demands came through media outlets rather than directly to the family was itself odd, and the fact that they stopped entirely suggests one of two things. Either the ransom notes were hoaxes from people trying to capitalize on a high-profile case, which sadly happens, or the actual kidnappers realized law enforcement was too close and decided to go silent. Investigators have not publicly confirmed which scenario they believe is true, but the silence from whoever took Nancy speaks volumes. Either they got what they wanted without needing a ransom, which would support the theory that this was about something other than money, or they realized they couldn't safely collect a ransom without being caught. Sheriff Nanos has repeatedly stated that investigators have a theory about motive. He's suggested it might be financial, but he's also left room for other possibilities. In his March 13th interview with NBC, Nanos mentioned that investigators are considering whether Nancy was targeted for personal reasons, for financial gain, or as part of a predatory selection. That last phrase, predatory selection, is chilling. It implies the possibility that Nancy wasn't chosen because of who she was, but simply because she fit a profile. Elderly, wealthy, living alone, vulnerable. If that's the case, then Sheriff Nanos' warning that the suspect could strike again takes on even more weight. Because if this person successfully abducted an 84-year-old woman from her home without leaving useful evidence behind, and if they're still free 46 days later, what's to stop them from doing it again? The FBI's billboard campaign, launched in partnership with Clear Channel Outdoor, was designed to address exactly that concern. Billboards featuring Nancy's photo and the FBI tip line number have been placed in 7 cities across 4 states: El Paso, Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston in Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Los Angeles, California. The strategy behind placing billboards in multiple states is based on the theory that the suspect may have traveled across state lines, either to commit the crime or to flee afterward. But that strategy has come under fire from an unexpected source, a former FBI agent. Jennifer Coffindaffer, a retired FBI special agent, took to social media last week to criticize the billboard campaign. While she praised the effort to raise awareness, she called the placement strategy a shotgun approach that shows little direction. Her main criticism: the billboards feature only Nancy, not the masked suspect captured on camera. "Show him," Coffindaffer wrote. "He's the key. The abductor would have hidden Nancy. Likely no one in Texas or California would have ever seen her post-abduction, but they could know Porch Guy. I guarantee his friends and family recognize him." Coffindaffer's point is compelling. If you're trying to identify a suspect, why not show the only image you have of that suspect? The answer from law enforcement's perspective is likely that the image quality isn't good enough. The suspect is wearing a ski mask. His face isn't visible. His clothing is generic. The only truly distinctive item is the Ozark Trail backpack, which is a common, inexpensive model sold at Walmart and other retailers. Showing that image might not generate useful tips. But Coffindaffer argues that body language, build, posture, and the way someone moves can be recognizable to people who know them well. "Millions have no idea Nancy was even abducted," she wrote, including the pizza delivery guy who delivered pizza to Nancy's house post-abduction while sheriff's officers and dozens of reporters watched. Awareness is key, as is showing Porch Guy's face. The pizza delivery incident Coffindaffer referenced has become something of a symbol of how difficult this case has been to control. In the early days of the investigation, when Nancy's home was still an active crime scene, a pizza delivery driver showed up at the property with an order. Apparently someone, either as a prank or through some bizarre misunderstanding, had placed a delivery order to Nancy's address. The driver arrived to find deputies, FBI agents, and a crowd of media. The incident was captured on camera and raised questions about whether the person who placed that order was involved in the case or whether it was just a tasteless joke. Coffindaffer also floated another theory that's gained traction online. She suggested there might be a connection between Nancy's abduction and the arrest of 2 California teenagers in Scottsdale, Arizona, on January 31st, the same day Nancy disappeared. According to Fox 10 Phoenix, those 2 teenagers allegedly dressed as delivery drivers and assaulted a couple in their Scottsdale home, duct taping them and demanding access to cryptocurrency. Police believe the teens were being directed by individuals known only as Red and 8, communicating through the encrypted Signal app. Coffindaffer's theory is that the same criminal network might be behind multiple kidnapping attempts in Arizona, using young people as operatives. These cases have similarities, she wrote, and I have no doubt the FBI is making sure that Red and 8 have no connection to Nancy or funding other kidnapping attempts. It's a speculative theory, and there's no public evidence to support it. But it's not unreasonable. Scottsdale is only about 120 miles north of Tucson. The crimes happened on the same day. Both involved home invasions and cryptocurrency demands, and both cases remain unsolved. If there is a connection, it could mean Nancy's abduction is part of a larger criminal operation, which would explain why investigators have been so tight-lipped about certain aspects of the case. But it would also make the investigation exponentially more complicated. Tracking down individuals who operate through encrypted apps, use teenagers as expendable operatives, and move across state lines is a massive undertaking. It would require coordination between multiple agencies, extensive digital forensics, and a lot of time that Nancy may not have. As of today, March 18th, Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 46 days. That's 6.5 weeks. According to data compiled by the FBI, the chances of finding a kidnapping victim alive decrease significantly after the first 48 hours. After a week, the statistics become grim. After a month, they're almost hopeless. There are exceptions, of course. Elizabeth Smart was found alive after 9 months. J.C. Dugard was held for 18 years before being recovered. But those cases are extraordinary outliers. The vast majority of abduction victims who are recovered alive are found within the first few days. Nancy is 84 years old. She has a heart condition. She requires daily medication. Without that medication, according to Sheriff Nanos, she could face fatal complications within 24 hours. Even if she's still alive, even if her captors have been providing her medication, the physical and psychological toll of 46 days in captivity at her age would be immense. And yet, Savannah Guthrie and her family refuse to give up hope. On March 2nd, Savannah, along with her sister Annie and brother-in-law Tommaso, were photographed placing flowers and a card at a growing memorial outside Nancy's home. The handwritten message on their card read, "Though we are surrounded by so much darkness and uncertainty, our love burns bright. We love you, Mommy. We miss you so much." Savannah posted a photo on Instagram showing yellow flowers from the memorial. "We feel the love and prayers from our neighbors, from the Tucson community, and from around the country," she wrote. "Please don't stop praying and hoping with us." That message, "please don't stop," is heartbreaking in its desperation. It's the plea of a daughter who knows the odds, who understands what 46 days means statistically, but who cannot and will not accept that her mother is gone until there's definitive proof. The Tucson community has rallied around the Guthrie family in visible ways. A banner with notes from hundreds of well-wishers and an image of Nancy hangs outside a local television station. Church groups have held prayer vigils. Volunteers have distributed flyers. Local businesses have posted information about the case and the FBI tip line. The collective message is clear. This community wants answers. They want justice. They want Nancy home. But wanting isn't enough. And 46 days in, the hard truth is that investigators are no closer to making an arrest than they were on day one. They have evidence. They have theories. They have 18,000 tips that have poured into the FBI and Sheriff's office. They have DNA that they're still trying to process. They have surveillance footage from multiple cameras. They have witness statements from neighbors, family members, Uber drivers, and construction workers. They have all of this information, and somehow it still hasn't been enough to identify a suspect. Former FBI agent Eric Lasing, speaking with CBS News, acknowledged the challenge. An extended timeline like this, 45, 46 days, it becomes much harder to keep an investigation going, he said. Leads dry up. Witnesses forget details. The trail goes cold. But Lasing also suggested that the silence from law enforcement might not be entirely bad news. Sometimes, he said, when investigators stop holding press conferences and stop giving updates, it means they're onto something significant. They don't want to tip their hand. That's the hope, anyway. That behind the scenes, investigators are building a case. That the DNA analysis will yield results. That one of those 18,000 tips will turn out to be the one that breaks everything open. That the construction worker interviews or the review of January 24th surveillance footage will reveal a face, a name, a vehicle, something that leads to an arrest. But hope doesn't solve cases. Evidence does. And right now, 6.5 weeks in, the evidence that exists hasn't been enough. The Pima County Sheriff's Department continues to ask anyone with information to come forward. The FBI tip line, 1-800-CALL-FBI, is still active and monitored around the clock. The reward, now $1.2 million, remains on offer. And investigators, despite the political turmoil surrounding Sheriff Nanos, insist the case remains a top priority. But as day 46 comes to a close, the reality is stark. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. No arrests have been made. No suspects have been named. And the only image authorities have of the person who took her is a grainy doorbell camera video of a masked figure in the dark. For Savannah Guthrie and her family, every day that passes is another day of unbearable uncertainty. Every phone call could be the one they've been praying for, or the one they've been dreading. Every update from investigators could bring hope, or it could bring the confirmation of their worst fears. And for the Tucson community, every day without an arrest is another day of unease. Because if Sheriff Nanos is right, if this person could strike again, then every elderly resident living alone is a potential target. Every home with security cameras that can be disabled is vulnerable. Every family that trusts their neighborhood is safe has reason to worry. This case has become more than just the search for Nancy Guthrie. It's become a test of investigative resources, a political flashpoint, and a stark reminder that even in 2026, with all our technology and forensic capabilities, a determined and careful criminal can still disappear into the night. The question now is whether investigators can find Nancy Guthrie before it's too late, or whether this case will join the ranks of unsolved abductions that haunt families and communities for generations. Day 46, and still, no answers. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, please contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. That's 1-800-225-5324. You can also submit tips online at tips.fbi.gov. The family is offering a reward of up to $1.2 million for information leading to Nancy's recovery or an arrest in this case. Every tip matters. Someone out there knows something.